The Lufthansa Heist was a robbery at John F. Kennedy International Airport on December 11, 1978. An estimated $5 million in cash and $875,000 in jewelry were stolen, making it the largest cash robbery committed on American soil at the time. The robbery was the subject of two television films, The $10 Million Getaway and The Big Heist, and is a key plot element in the 1990 film Goodfellas. In July 2015, Rowman and Littlefield published a book titled The Lufthansa Heist, which tells the story of the crime. It was co-authored by Henry Hill. The heist's magnitude made it one of the longest investigated crimes in the United States. For over 35 years after it happened, the latest arrest associated with it was made in 2014. Planning: the heist was planned by Jimmy Burke, an associate of the Lucky's crime family, and carried out by several associates. The plot began when bookmaker Martin Krugman told Henry Hill about millions of dollars in untraceable money, American currency flown in once a month from monetary exchanges for military servicemen and tourists in West Germany. The currency would arrive via Lufthansa and was then stored in a vault at Kennedy Airport. The information had come from Louis Werner, a worker at the airport who owed Krugman $20,000 for gambling debts, and from his co-worker Peter Grunwald. Werner and Grunwald had previously been successful in stealing $22,000 in foreign currency from their employer Lufthansa in 1976. Louis Werner helped Krugman throughout the planning, even telling him where the robbers should park. A Ford Econoline 150 van would be used to transport the cash, and a crash car would accompany the van to run vehicular interference should the plot be interrupted and a police chase ensue. Burke decided on Tommy DeSimone, Joe Civitello Sr., Louis Cafora, Angelo Sape, Tony Rodriguez, Joseph M. Costa, and Burke's son Frank James Burke as inside gunman. Paolo Licastri, a Sicilian shooter, was later included as a representative of the Gambino crime family, which had been promised a tribute payment to sanction the crime. Parnell Stax Edwards was a black associate of Burke's gang who served as a gopher and chauffeur, and he was also included to dispose of the van used in the heist. Once everyone was together, Jimmy told Lucky's family underboss Paul Vario, who sent his son Peter to collect his end of the loot. Vincent Asaro, the Gambino family's crew chief at the airport, would also be owed money because Burke, a Lucky's associate, was performing the robbery on territory belonging to the Gambino family. Execution: on December 11, at 3:12 a.m., when cargo agent Kerry Hallen returned from making a transfer at American Airlines, he spotted a black Ford Econoline van backed into the ramp door. Hallen walked toward the van to investigate, and two men without masks or gloves brutally struck him over the head with pistols. Hallen had his navy hat pulled down to his chin and was thrown into the van, where a third robber was waiting. Another person took his wallet and said that they knew where his family was and they had others ready to visit them. Hallen nodded to indicate that he would cooperate with the robbers. Senior Agent Rolf Rebman heard a noise by the loading ramp and went to investigate. 6 armed, masked robbers forced their way in and handcuffed him. They then used a key provided by Werner and walked through a maze of corridors to round up the 2 other employees. That accomplished, 2 gunmen ventured downstairs to look for unexpected visitors. The other robbers marched the employees to a lunchroom, where the other employees were on a 3 a.m. break. The gunmen burst in the lunchroom brandishing their firearms. They showed a bloodied Hallen as an indication of their intentions if anyone got out of line. They knew each employee by name and forced them onto the ground. They made John Murray, the terminal's senior cargo agent, call Rudy Erich on the intercom. The robbers knew that Erich was the only guard that night who knew the right combination to open the double-door vault. Murray was made to pretend to Erich that there was a problem with a load from Frankfurt, and he told Erich to meet him in the cafeteria. As Erich approached the cafeteria, he was met by 2 shotguns and saw the other employees bound and gagged on the cafeteria floor. 1 gunman kept watch over the 10 employees, and the other 3 took Erich at gunpoint down 2 flights of stairs to the double-door vault. Erich later reported that the robbers were informed and knew all about the safety systems in the vault, including the double-door system, whereby one door must be shut in order for the other one to be opened without activating the alarm. The robbers ordered Erich to open up the first door to a 10 by 20-foot room. They knew that, if he opened the second door, he would activate an alarm to the Port Authority police unit at the airport. Once inside, they ordered Erich to lie on the ground and began sifting through invoices and freight manifests to determine which parcels they wanted from among the many similarly wrapped ones. Finally, they began hurling parcels of cash through the door. Around 40 parcels were removed. Erich was then made to lock the inner door before unlocking the outer door. 2 of the gunmen were assigned to load the parcels into the van while the others tied up Erich. The employees were told not to call the Port Authority until 4:30 a.m. When the robbers left, it was 4:16 a.m. according to the cafeteria clock. No calls were made until 4:30, when a report of the theft was made. This 15-minute buffer was crucial because Werner's inside information made the robbers aware that the Port Authority police could seal off the entire airport within 90 seconds. At 4:21 a.m., the van containing the robbers and the stolen cash pulled out of the cargo terminal and left JFK, followed by the crash car. The robbery took only 64 minutes and was the largest money heist ever committed on American soil at the time. The robbers drove to a garage in Canarsie, Brooklyn, where Jimmy Burke was waiting. There, the money was switched to a third vehicle that was driven away by Jimmy Burke and his son Frank. The rest of the robbers left and drove home, except Paolo Licastri, who insisted on taking the subway home. Parnell Stacks Edwards put stolen license plates on the van and was supposed to drive it to an auto junkyard in New Jersey, where it would be compacted to scrap metal. Burke and his son Frank drove the third car with all the stolen money to a safe house to be counted. This is when Burke realized the true scope of the robbery. He expected to bring in no more than $2 million and was shocked by the $6 million haul. Aftermath. Investigation. Parnell Stacks Edwards was supposed to take the van used in the burglary to a car compactor in New Jersey to have it destroyed. Instead, jubilant from the gang's easy heist, he got high on marijuana while en route to the junkyard. He then drove the van to his girlfriend's apartment, conspicuously parked it in a no-parking zone, and spent the evening getting drunk and snorting cocaine, apparently intending to deliver the van to the junkyard the next day. The next morning, while Edwards was still asleep in his girlfriend's apartment, the police discovered the van, impounded it, and quickly identified it as the vehicle used in the burglary. Edwards himself successfully fled the complex without being apprehended. His fingerprints were later found on the steering wheel, and a muddy shoe print found at the airport was matched to a pair of Puma AG athletic shoes that Edwards owned. The FBI had 2 immediate suspicions of who had the connections and organizational skill to lead such an audacious heist in the New York area, the first being the John Gotti crew and the second being the Jimmy Burke crew. The FBI correctly identified the Burke crew as the likely perpetrators within 3 days of the robbery, largely owing to the discovery of the truck, coupled with Edwards' pre-established connections with the Burke gang at Roberts Lounge. They set up heavy surveillance, following the gang in helicopters and bugging their vehicles, the phones at Roberts Lounge, and even the payphones nearest to the bar. The FBI managed to record a few bits of tantalizing chatter despite the background sounds of rock and disco music, such as Angelo Sape telling an unidentified man about a brown case and a bag from Lufthansa, and his telling his girlfriend Hope Barron, "I want to see. Look where the money's at. Dig a hole in the cellar," inaudible rear lawn. But this was not enough to definitively connect Burke's crew to the heist, and no search warrants were issued. According to Henry Hill, Jimmy Burke became paranoid and agitated once he realized how much attention Edwards' failure had drawn, and resolved to kill anyone who could implicate him in the heist, starting with Edwards himself. With the violent deaths of most of the heist associates and planners, little evidence and few witnesses remained connecting Burke or his crew to the heist. However, the authorities were eventually able to gather enough evidence to prosecute inside man Louis Werner for helping to plan the heist. Lucky's crime family associate Donald Francos later expressed frustration in being a close friend of Burke and regular habitual copyright at Roberts Lounge but not involved in the actual heist. In his biography Contract Killer, the explosive story of the Mafia's most notorious hitman Donald the Greek Francos According to a self-published book he is selling online, Kerry Hallen, the Lufthansa employee who was pistol-whipped, was so disgusted with the behavior of the FBI and of the U.S. Attorney's Office that he complained to federal judges. Hallen kept notes on his meetings with law enforcement. The stolen cash and jewelry were never recovered. Vincent Asaro was 78 years old and a reputed high-ranking member of the Bonanno crime family. He was arrested on January 23, 2014 in conjunction with an indictment charging him with involvement in the Lufthansa heist. The case against Asaro was based on an informant who was referred to by Asaro's attorney as one of the worst witnesses I've ever seen. Daniel Simone co-authored the book The Lufthansa Heist, in collaboration with Henry Hill. He reported to the New York Post page 6 that Hill told him, Asaro had no involvement in the famous robbery. On November 12, 2015, Mr. Asaro was acquitted of all charges connected to the Lufthansa robbery by a jury in Federal District Court in Brooklyn. On April 7, 2015, author Robert Sperner released the book The Mystery of the Lufthansa Airlines Heist with collaborator Dominic Sikal, a former member of the Bonanno crime family. According to Sikal, between $2 million and $4 million of the Lufthansa loot was stashed in a safe deposit box by Jimmy Burke. The keys were given to his daughters, Kathy and Robin. Sikal reported that Kathy Burke's husband Anthony Bruno Imblicato, a Bonanno capo, gained access to the box with Vincent Asaro, also a Bonanno capo. Sikal said that Asaro spent $250,000 of the money on a movie that was never produced. The remainder was lost at casinos by Asaro. Violent deaths of heist associates equals, Jimmy Burke realized that the robbery had netted $6 million, 3 times the amount that he expected, and he knew that a robbery of this magnitude would attract the intense attention of the police at every level, causing a lot of problems for everyone involved, as well as for organized crime in New York in general. Burke became increasingly concerned that there were too many witnesses who knew of his involvement, and too many who became greedy once learning the true amount of money stolen in the heist. Jimmy Burke realized that Edwards' failure to properly dispose of the van had allowed the police to catch on to his crew, and he resolved to kill anyone who could implicate him in the heist. The first to be murdered, just 7 days after the heist, was Edwards, shot and killed in his apartment on December 18, 1978, by Tommy DeSimone and Angelo Sape. This was the first in a series of criminals and their acquaintances who were murdered after the heist at Burke's orders. Others involved in the planning, execution, or follow-up of the heist were not killed in Burke's witness elimination program of 1978-79, but did suffer violent ends. The informants, Peter Grunwald, a Lufthansa heist organizer, who testified against his friend and fellow co-worker Louis Werner. Louis Werner, a Manhattan accountant who doubled as a money launderer. William Bill Fischetti, a taxi dispatch company owner, he was a mob relative who was involved in selling stolen bearer bonds. Fischetti had an affair with Beverly Werner. Frank Medder, a numbers runner who had been worked over by Angelo Sape and Daniel Rizzo because of his boss Martin Krugman's incompetence. Janet Barbieri, Louis Werner's girlfriend and future wife, testified against Werner before a grand jury. 14 months after the heist, Henry Hill was arrested on other charges. He soon learned that Burke and Sape had been planning to kill him, and that his arrest made the others believe he was a threat to reveal details of the heist. A month later, Hill entered the Witness Protection Program. He was not able to help the government obtain convictions against Vario or Burke for the Lufthansa robbery, although both were convicted of murder because of his testimony. Fates equals, Jimmy Burke was convicted of murdering Richard Eaton. Burke died of lung cancer at age 64 in a Buffalo hospital after being transferred there from the Wayne Correctional Facility in Alden, New York, April 13, 1996. Paul Vario died in Fort Worth Federal Prison of respiratory illness May 3, 1988 at age 73. Henry Hill entered the Witness Protection Program. Hill died in a Los Angeles hospital on June 12, 2012, the day after his 69th birthday, after a long battle with an undisclosed illness. Tony Rodriguez was found dead at age 30 inches his Plainview, Long Island, home on September 20, 1987. He died in his sleep from a rare genetic heart defect which he did not know he had. Joseph M. Costa's body was never found. Martin Krugman's body was never found. In 1986, he was declared legally deceased and his wife, Fran, received a $135,000 payout from his life insurance policy. Mark Santangeli, after suing Burke for his share of the Lufthansa profits, was murdered in New Jersey by mafia associates. He played no part in the actual heist. Teresa Ferrara's dismembered body was found near Toms River, New Jersey, in 1979. No one has been charged with her murder. Paolo Licastri, Joe Manriquez, Robert McMahon, and Angelo Sape's murders haven't been solved. Louis Cafora and his wife Joanna's bodies have never been found. Tommy DeSimone's body was never found. Peter Grunwald rekindled the relationship with his estranged wife and disappeared into the Witness Protection Program. Bill Fischetti divorced his wife and disappeared into the Witness Protection Program. Frank Menna disappeared into the Witness Protection Program. Louis Werner, convicted on May 16, 1979. Married Janet Barbieri following his release from prison. See also, List of large-value U.S. robberies. References. Further reading, Vokeman, Ernest. Cummings, John. The Heist, How a Gang Stole $8 Million at Kennedy Airport and Lived to Regret It. New York, Franklin Watts. ISBN 0-531-15024-0. Hill, Henry. Gus Russo. Gangsters and Goodfellas, Wise Guys, Witness Protection, and Life on the Run. M. Evans and Company, Incorporated. ISBN 1-56731-757-X.